Hello, let's talk about comic books and fluorescent inks. Some of you may know we do a line of books called Authentic Editions, which reproduce and recreate classic Golden Age books as if you pulled them off the shelf when the time they were actually published. And so we did a line of pre-code horror books, and one of the variants that you could get in that set are fluorescent ink covers. So let's talk about fluorescent inks. I'm actually going to walk you through the creative process that we went through to get to what I think is a pretty phenomenal result. First, I want to look at what do we actually know about fluorescent ink. And so I'm going to share what I knew about them to begin with. So here's this Hulk cover, Hulk 377. This was actually one of the few fluorescent ink covers that I was familiar with initially. And the thing that you can note is that even seen on the screen, which is not a very good representation of it, but there's a lot of clear green, big field of green area. So this is one big giant space for this bright fluorescent color, and then the pink of the logo as well. Looking at a couple of other examples, big area of open color for this fluorescent yellow and pink. Again, this Street Angel, also amazing Jim Rugg. Basically one big block of fluorescent pink and then black and white with this lighter tone. You can look at the Sickness, number 1 fluorescent ink variant, black and green. So what do these all have in common? Basically all of the fluorescent ink covers that we've seen are fundamentally one or two big blocks of color. And we didn't really think about that going in. We did have some conversations with the printer about, can we use fluorescent inks, and, what would the process be to design that? And so we based our original comps that we shared, which we, honestly, we did kind of pump up the saturation. We wanted to show the distinction between the regular covers and our kind of assumptions about what the brightness of the fluorescent inks would be, just being able to tell the difference in the campaign. Then when we actually got into producing these, we found something interesting. In talking with the printer, we did not want to create a different version of something like Chamber of Chills 19. And show you, here, this was not something that we wanted to modify. This is, the whole point of this project was to restore and respect the original book and the original art. So we found ourselves having to figure out a unique approach to this, which was to think about how could we take the original art, not just create some version of it that had this big empty space for a big blob of fluorescent color, but how could we do something more unique, more interesting, and work with the art that was there to still create a fluorescent effect. And so we essentially did 4 print tests. And honestly, as we discussed this with the printer and came to these tests, this was one of the things that actually delayed some of our production early on, that they had never done this before. So yes, printing a PMS fluorescent ink, no problem. Printing it in the context of also working with CMYK, a little less experience all the way around. And so we devised these 4 different tests. And so basically we're working with offset presses, and traditional offset presses use 4 colors to print: cyan, magenta, yellow, and black. So CMYK. Each one is printed one at a time, and it's the combination of those colors that give you the final printed result, the blend of the colors, so forth and so on. So these are all printed on offset presses with, or actually older printing equipment to get the effects that we wanted. So here are the tests. I'm just going to share them with you. So actually not quite going in order because I kind of want to show the decision-making process that we went through here. So here is cover test number 3. So this is CMYK plus spot overprint. And so this is printed, these are just, kind of small versions so we could see what a bunch of different covers look like. So this is the regular cover printed CMYK, and then a PMS fluorescent ink printed over the top. In this case, this kind of greenish fluorescent color. So, if you're like me, you got these and you're like, no, pretty much immediately, no, this is not what we want these to look like. So let's go on to test number 2. So this is CMYK, also plus spot. In this case, it's using spot yellow. So basically it's regular CMYK. And then the yellow has a fluorescent ink over the top of that. And, these look fine, but talk about subtle and distinct, or not distinct. Talk about not being able to tell the difference between the regular covers and this particular approach. So this was a no as well. Number 3, we got pretty close to saying yes to because they were the most distinct and noticeably different from the regular covers. So this is CK plus spot. So there's actually no magenta in these covers. It's cyan plus a fluorescent. Actually, sorry, there's magenta, but it's the fluorescent magenta. So there's no yellow. Everything is cyan plus fluorescent magenta, PMS magenta, and then black over the top of it. And we thought these actually looked pretty cool and maybe something that we would do something with in the future. But ultimately, we wanted them to not feel like we were losing a color here. And so this brought us to the one that we chose. So this is something that, as we understand it, and as we have confirmed as far as our printer knows, no one has ever done this before. And so this was the thing, when someone says no one's ever done this before, my inclination is to say, let's try it. So, these are actually printed all with fluorescent color. So every ink except for black is fluorescent. And so you're taking the 3 different PMS colors, the 3 different fluorescent colors, and using them like traditional inks, blending them to create the different tones that make up the covers. And so it is true, as some have pointed out, that initially this is a more subtle effect. Like if you don't know what you're looking at, and if you don't see them side by side with the regular covers, they don't just immediately pop the way that some of the examples that we looked at did, or the way that we initially expected them to. But it's hard to tell in the video, but this magenta and the yellow, especially when they are kind of bigger open fields, is very clearly fluorescent when you see it in person. Where it's a little harder to tell is where, in something like this, like, yes, the yellow is very bright, the magenta is much more clearly fluorescent, but when you start to have blended colors like this darker green, this is a mix of fluorescent magenta, fluorescent yellow and fluorescent cyan. So the only way to get that color is to mix those together, and it still has a darker appearance to it. There's actually a little bit of black in there as well. So that creates, more of an effect that is closer to the original art. And yet this is all fluorescent ink. And that's the part that is truly unique. And again, as far as we know, it has never been done before. So that brings us to what's the result of that in the actual finished book. And I want to show you a couple of examples. So I'm going to show you a couple of examples. So while I pull these out, coming in close to the camera here. So here we have Chamber of Shells 19, obviously this iconic cover. And again, one that's a little harder to tell the difference because there's so much black on the cover. But when we look at the difference, you can especially see, look at the reds. It's hard to tell on camera, but look at the yellows. This is a much more orange yellow. This is a much brighter yellow. If you look at her dress, this is a much darker red. This is a much brighter red. Even the purples in the skull, much brighter. So again, subtler than expected? Absolutely yes. The same? Absolutely not. And again, it's a little hard to see on the video, but if you can see them both next to each other, they really are distinct. And then let's look at Suspense 3. Much more obvious because as we looked at, this does have a big area of color, and even our main antagonist here, our evil bad guy here, big area of color. So look at, how much brighter that is than the original regular red. The yellows really pop compared. The reds throughout really pop. Even the blue is a little more subtle, but it's definitely, this blended blue is brighter here in the fluorescent inks than it is in the regular inks. So yes, more subtle. Again, distinct, absolutely as well. This one, you can really more clearly see the difference even here in the video. And then there's one big bonus that you may not realize when you use fluorescent inks. And so since we're talking about pre-code horror and we're just past Halloween, let's turn off the lights and get into spooky season here. So here we are in the dark. I happen to pick up a black light and boom, look at this. The regular cover, nothing. The fluorescents absolutely glow. And so it's a pretty amazing effect. I'm just going to spread this out so you can really see these two. Look at this. Like, it's really cool. So the fluorescent inks under the black light really just look pretty incredible. Just they're just glowing, popping off the page. Pretty awesome. So bonus, the fluorescents, pick up a little black light. I got a little black flashlight off of Amazon. Very, very fun to see. So let me turn the light back on. And we're back. So that's how we got to the treatment that we went with, the choices that we made, the samples that we looked at. It's a fascinating process to dive into. Again, I like solving problems creatively, figuring out things that people have never done before. And hopefully this helps you understand, how we got where we ended up and why I think these are so freaking cool. So if you back this campaign, I am always grateful, so appreciative of everything you did and continue to do to help us bring this project to life. We will certainly have a lot more to come. And if you like this kind of breakdown of how we got through some of the decision making, let me know, and we can share some more of that as well. Thank you very much.